The microphone hit the desk with a soft thud. Johnny Carson, mid-sentence, mid-laugh, mid-everything, just stopped. The band behind him went silent. Doc Severinson's trumpet hung in the air. Ed McMahon froze with his coffee cup halfway to his lips. 3,000 people in the studio audience didn't breathe. And at home, 12 million Americans leaned closer to their television screens, because in 30 years of The Tonight Show, Johnny Carson had never, ever done this. He wasn't looking at the camera anymore. He was looking at a small figure in the front row. A 7-year-old boy in a blue sweater, holding a folded piece of paper in his trembling hands. How did we get here? It was February 1979. A Tuesday. Cold outside, warm inside Studio 6B at NBC in Burbank. Johnny Carson walked onto the set at exactly 5:30 p.m. for the live taping, just like he had done 4,000 times before. Same desk. Same curtain. Same spotlight that made his eyes squint just a little when he turned to camera one. But tonight felt different. The audience coordinator had told him something unusual during the pre-show briefing. There was a kid in the front row. 7 years old. The youngest audience member they'd ever allowed into a taping. Special circumstances, she said. The boy's mother had written to the show 6 months ago. Johnny never read those letters himself, producers handled that, but this one had made it all the way to his dressing room. He skimmed it while his makeup artist powdered his forehead. The letter was 3 pages, handwritten in careful cursive. The mother's name was Catherine. Her son's name was Michael. And Michael had 6 months to live. Johnny folded the letter, put it in his jacket pocket, and walked to the stage. The show started like it always did. Monologue. Jokes about the weather, about politicians, about whatever strange news item had crossed the wire that afternoon. The audience laughed. Johnny smiled. Ed laughed too loudly at a punchline that didn't quite land. Everything was normal. Then Johnny glanced at the front row. Michael was there. Small for his age. Pale. The blue sweater looked 2 sizes too big. His mother sat beside him, one hand resting on his shoulder. The boy wasn't laughing at the jokes. He was just watching. Studying. Like he was trying to memorize every second. Johnny Carson stopped mid-monologue. The entire studio froze. He set the microphone down on the desk. Not dropped. Placed. Deliberately. Then he stepped out from behind the desk, something he almost never did during the monologue. The floor director's hand went up, confused, checking if this was a planned bit. It wasn't. Johnny walked to the edge of the stage. He crouched down, eye level with the front row. "Hey there," he said, his voice quiet, almost a whisper, but the studio microphones caught every word. "What's your name?" The boy looked at his mother. She nodded, tears already forming. "Michael," the boy said. His voice was so small. "Michael," Johnny repeated, like he was tasting the name. "That's a strong name. You know, my middle name is William, but nobody ever calls me that. Do people call you Mike? Or do you go by Michael?" "Michael. Michael it is." Johnny smiled. Not the TV smile. A real one. "You got something there? In your hand?" Michael looked down at the folded paper. He'd been holding it so tightly it was wrinkled. He nodded. "Can I see it?" Michael hesitated. Then he stood up, his legs wobbly, and took 3 steps toward the stage. Johnny reached down, took the paper gently, and unfolded it. It was a drawing. Crayon. A little rough, the way a 7-year-old draws, but you could tell what it was, a man behind a desk, smiling, with a moon and stars in the background. At the bottom, in uneven letters, "Thank you for making my mom smile." Johnny stared at it for a long time. Too long. The silence stretched. Someone in the audience coughed. Ed McMahon shifted in his chair. Doc Severinson lowered his trumpet completely. Then Johnny looked back at Michael. "Did you draw this?" "Yes, sir." "For me?" "Yes, sir." Johnny's jaw tightened. He folded the drawing carefully, like it was made of glass, and put it in his jacket pocket, right next to the letter. "Can you do me a favor, Michael?" "Okay. Come up here." The audience gasped. You didn't just walk onto the Tonight Show stage. There were rules, protocols, union regulations. But Johnny reached down, and Michael's mother lifted him up, and Johnny took the boy's hand and brought him onto the stage. Ed McMahon stood up from his chair, not sure if he should do something, say something. Johnny waved him off. Michael stood there, tiny under the stage lights, looking out at 3,000 people. His blue sweater had a small hole near the collar. His shoes were too shiny, like they'd been polished that morning for something important. Johnny crouched down again, still holding Michael's hand. "You know what this show is, Michael? The Tonight Show." "That's right. And you know what it's really about?" Michael shook his head. "It's about making people feel good. That's it. That's the whole job. Some nights I tell jokes. Some nights I talk to movie stars. But really, I'm just trying to make people smile before they go to bed. You understand?" "I think so." "Your mom watches the show?" "Every night." "Every night," Johnny repeated softly. "And it makes her smile?" "Yes, sir." "Then I'm doing my job." Johnny's voice cracked, just slightly, just enough that the microphones picked it up. "But you know what, Michael? Tonight you're doing my job. You just made 12 million people smile. You made me smile. And I think that's pretty special." Michael looked up at him, confused, but smiling a little now. Backstage, the producers made a choice no one would have ever allowed. Fred de Cordova, the executive producer, was standing in the wings, headset on, watching the monitors. His assistant director was in his ear. "Fred, we're 3 minutes over. We need to cut to commercial. We need to." "Shut up," Fred said. "But," I said, "shut up. Let him go." On stage, Johnny was still crouched down, still holding Michael's hand. "You like the band?" Johnny asked, pointing back at Doc Severinsen and the musicians. "Yes, sir." "Want to hear them play something?" Michael nodded. Johnny stood up, still holding the boy's hand, and turned to Doc. "Doc, you got something soft? Something nice?" Doc looked at Johnny, then at Michael, then back at Johnny. He understood. He raised his trumpet, and the band started playing. "What a Wonderful World." Slow. Gentle. The kind of music that makes you remember things you didn't know you'd forgotten. Johnny stood there on the stage, holding Michael's hand, and they just listened. The audience was silent. Not a cough. Not a whisper. Just the music, and the lights, and a 7-year-old boy standing on the most famous stage in America. When the song ended, Johnny crouched down one more time. "Michael, I want you to know something. Your drawing? I'm keeping it. It's going in my dressing room, right on the wall, where I can see it every single day. And every time I see it, I'm going to remember tonight. I'm going to remember you. Okay? Okay. And your mom? She's pretty great, huh? She's the best. I believe you." Johnny's eyes were shining now, wet, and he didn't try to hide it. "You take care of her, all right?" "I will." Johnny reached into his pocket and pulled out one of his cue cards. The ones he used for jokes. He flipped it over to the blank side, pulled a pen from his jacket, and wrote something. Then he folded it and handed it to Michael. "Don't open this now. Open it later. When you need to remember that somebody saw you. Really saw you. Okay?" Michael nodded, holding the card like it was made of gold. Johnny helped him down from the stage one more time. As Michael walked back to his seat, the audience began to stand. One person. Then another. Then the entire studio was on its feet. Not clapping. Not cheering. Just standing. A silent ovation that said more than any applause ever could. Catherine pulled Michael close, kissing the top of his head, tears streaming down her face. Michael looked back at Johnny one last time, and Johnny gave him a small salute. 2 fingers to his temple. A gesture that meant, "I see you, soldier. You're braver than me." Johnny stood, helped Michael down from the stage, and handed him back to his mother. Catherine was sobbing, her hand over her mouth, trying to stay quiet. Johnny reached down, took her hand, and squeezed it once. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Then he walked back to his desk, picked up the microphone, and looked at the camera. "We'll be right back," he said, his voice steady again, controlled, the professional returning. The screen cut to commercial. But backstage, Johnny walked straight to his dressing room, closed the door, and sat down on the couch. He took out the drawing, unfolded it again, and stared at it. Fred de Cordova found him there 10 minutes later. "You okay, Johnny?" "Yeah." Johnny wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "Yeah, I'm okay. That was something. That was everything, Fred." But this was the moment no one in the studio, nor anyone at home, ever saw coming. The next day, the network received 47,000 phone calls. Not complaints. Thank yous. Letters started arriving by the boxful. People who had watched the show, who had seen Johnny stop everything, who had seen him crouch down and hold a sick child's hand, wrote to tell him what it meant. One letter, from a woman in Ohio, said, "My son died 3 years ago. He was 8. Watching you with that little boy last night, I felt like someone finally understood." Another, from a man in Texas, "I've watched your show for 20 years. Last night was the first time I cried." A third letter arrived from a nurse in Seattle. "I work in pediatric oncology. I see families like Michael's every day. What you did wasn't just television. It was medicine." Johnny kept every single letter. He had them bound in a leather folder that he kept in his desk drawer. On nights when the jokes didn't land, when the ratings dipped, when he felt tired of the grind, he would open that folder and read them. They reminded him why he did this job. Johnny never responded to the letters publicly. He didn't need to. He put Michael's drawing in a frame and hung it on the wall of his dressing room, right next to his desk, where he could see it before every show. Next to it, he pinned the cue card he'd written that night. The one Michael had taken home. Years later, in an interview with Barbara Walters, she asked him if he remembered what he'd written on that card. Johnny smiled. That real smile again. "I wrote, 'You are braver than you know. And you taught me something tonight.'" "Thank you, Michael." Barbara pressed him. "Did you mean that? Or was it just something kind to say?" Johnny's smile faded. He looked directly at the camera. "I meant every word. That boy had 6 months to live, and he spent one of his good nights sitting in a television studio, just so his mother could smile. That's not just brave. That's the purest thing I've ever witnessed." Michael passed away 4 months later, in June. His mother sent Johnny a note. It said, "He talked about that night every single day. Thank you for giving him a moment he could hold on to. Thank you for seeing him." Johnny read the note during a commercial break. He folded it carefully, put it in his pocket, and went back to the desk. He did his monologue. He told his jokes. He made people laugh. But from that night on, whenever someone asked him what the greatest moment of his career was, he never said it was interviewing a president, or hosting the Oscars, or any of the 10,000 iconic moments that defined The Tonight Show. He said it was a Tuesday in February, when he stopped telling jokes, and just listened. Because that's what the show was really about. Not the laughs. Not the celebrities. Not the ratings. It was about seeing people. Really seeing them. And Johnny Carson, for 30 years, never forgot that. In 1985, during a particularly difficult taping, Johnny found himself struggling. The jokes weren't working. The guests were flat. He felt disconnected. During a commercial break, he looked up at Michael's drawing on the wall. Ed McMahon noticed. He walked over, put a hand on Johnny's shoulder. "You thinking about that kid?" "Every day, Ed. Every single day. He changed you." "No," Johnny said quietly. "He reminded me who I was supposed to be." When Johnny returned from the break, he did something he rarely did. He spoke directly to the camera, bypassing the comedy, the setup, the performance. Sometimes this job is just about showing up and doing the work. But the best nights? The best nights are when you realize you're not here for the laughs. You're here for the moments in between. The real stuff. The stuff that matters. The audience didn't quite understand what he meant. But 12 million people at home did. Because they'd been there that night in 1979. They'd seen what happened when Johnny Carson stopped being a host and became human. The drawing stayed on the wall until the day he left NBC. When he retired in 1992, he took it with him. It was one of the only things from the studio he kept. Years later, after Johnny passed away, his estate donated several items to the Smithsonian. The drawing wasn't among them. He'd asked that it be returned to Michael's mother. It arrived in a wooden frame, with a note in Johnny's handwriting. He made me better. Thank you for sharing him with us. JC. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. And if this moment touched you the way it touched millions that night, share it. Make sure no one forgets what it means to truly see someone. That night in 1979, Johnny Carson didn't just host a talk show. He reminded an entire country what kindness looks like under the bright lights, when the cameras are rolling, and when it would be easier to just keep going. He stopped. He listened. He saw a little boy who needed to be seen. And in that moment, he became more than a host. He became human. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten.